Hello, guys. Hope you can hear me. Hope everybody's doing good. Hey, Joe. What? Okay. That's nice. Hello, Frank. Wow. Hope you guys are doing well. It's a strange time, isn't it? Well, how do we make work in this strange time, guys? It's an interesting question. Anyways, welcome to my studio. Give you a little tour. Let's see. Camera here. Okay. So I set up a little wall here with a few things. There's a lot that's going on. And I'm trying to reconfigure this all out and trying to figure out how it makes sense at this particular time in history, with the pandemic and everything. So yeah, I have a few paintings here that I've put on the wall, and I would like for you guys to go ahead and shoot me with some questions, and then we can discuss whatever you want me to talk about. Okay, so this is called, I'll just go to the paintings, I suppose. It's called Napoleon in Haiti. It's mixed media with collage. It's a few years old, but I thought it made sense because it has this absence of people except for Napoleon himself. Haiti was one of the places that continued to be liberated and was never colonized. So it has some relevance. There's a close look. I show some of the little collage elements here. Okay. Thanks, Joe. Here we go. And then some other work. It's a good question. What motivates my work? Well, I made a choice long ago that this is what I wanted to do. I suppose I am very in tune with what happens around me in terms of how I render my work and think about it. So it's a very complex question because things have drastically changed. I feel like we as artists, those who are artists here, let's go back here to my face. Okay. Those of us who are artists are thinking about how to respond to this thing. And it's a very complex and difficult question to answer at this point. It's a little early. But I mean, of course, this particular event necessitates for artists to really contextualize pretty much everything, your entire course of your practice. It's no longer about these particular things we want to talk about. It's sort of a global dialogue, which unfortunately, through this pandemic, we have sort of come together. And we may find a unifying narrative now to really tell our stories. Let's see, somebody asked me about scale. Scale is a very interesting question too. I suppose for me, the message dictates the scale in many cases. Also the convenience of whether you have a large studio space that allows you to make large work. More I think about this particular situation, I'm thinking that art making needs to become foundational around our lives in order to create things. So they could be on our dining room table, or it could be, in your bedroom, in your bed before, whatever works. For me, it's a decision. If it's a decision of working on small scale, I work inside my house, which of course informs me with a variety of different sort of questions working indoors outside the studio, and that continuously sort of comes into the question. The source material of the collage is mainly National Geographics. I've mostly just used National Geographic so far. I just feel like their depiction of indigenous people, for instance, is sort of almost blatantly racist. And I know they're trying to sort of do this revisionist type of publication now, which actually talks about their mistakes and stuff. But I do feel that that that's fine and all, but I feel like there's a history of National Geographics depicting especially indigenous people in a very voyeuristic fashion, and to use them as collages, almost removing them from their original context and sort of freeing the subject matter that is framed by this particular sort of voyeuristic view. And of course, it's they're also very interesting and immediate things. Collage I find interesting because this has the relationship with contemporary literature, magazine culture, magazine aesthetic. So that's why the collage is important. I think that to borrow something from contemporary printing is interesting because it then politicizes a different type of propaganda. Let's see. Okay. Any more questions? Hello, Coleman Pryor. Yeah, buy it. I hope everybody's doing fine and taking good care of themselves. This whole idea of social distancing is interesting to me because it has this sort of racial dynamics that hasn't quite played out yet, but I believe it will in terms of how people live and just sort of the politics of occupying space. And some people don't have the luxury of that sort of distancing. A lot of cultures don't live like we do here, and I think that term specifically is for people who have the privilege of space, and they can exercise those things. So it's very interesting, and I think a lot about that in terms of my practice as well. Social distancing, how does social distancing work in the sense of art viewing, in terms of how do you look at, how do you read art, and whether we should establish some kind of distancing from the artwork itself, because it really does then come back to the question of scale and how to view things at different scales. I have a miniature background, so I do very small paintings as well, which requires you to be in very close proximity to it. And so it becomes much more of a maybe personal experience. There's a lot in play right now. It's very difficult to sort of think about what would be next for us. So we'll go back to the paintings. All right, let's see. Okay. This one is called Survivor's Remorse. It's really I'm sort of working to, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, is the aesthetics of violence. And that takes me to really thinking about the political aesthetics of ISIS. And I'm writing a paper that sort of draws these parallels between the cultural aesthetics, the political aesthetics of ISIS and Italian futurism. And this is one of the pieces that was inspired by that type of research. Let's move to a smaller piece here. This is an older piece, a few years ago. This is about migration and end of the road. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a line of people. Let's see what. Shoot me questions, guys. Am I still on? Can somebody let me know if I'm still on this thing? Oh, yes, maybe. Oh, I'll just show you some pictures, I suppose. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, sort of more of a painterly, interpretive take on her, or maybe the architecture of her sort of cult, if I may. I guess it's questions of legislation and all that come up when you think about her. Questions? Well, we could look at things in silence, of course. And I've never done this before, so if somebody could just let me know that you can still hear me and I'm still online. Okay, so I think I am. There's compassion fatigue, a piece that I recently got back. It's a few years old, but I feel like it is really like at this point in what. Oh, okay. So somebody just told me I'm not getting the questions. Wonder why? Oh, here I have a button here that I can push. Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. How long have you been painting? I've been painting since I was like a little boy, like maybe 5 or 6. I was sent to a instructor who taught me how to do miniature painting, and that's where it all started. Of course, in my culture, those things are not taken really seriously, so it never became a question whether this is going to be something I would continue doing, or would I just go into medicine or technology or some sort of thing like that. But it turns out that that didn't quite work out, and this is what I was stuck with. So I'm very happy and feel very lucky. Let's see, more questions. Okay, somebody asked me questions. Can you speak? Yes, sure. I could talk about the landscape questions. I mean, landscapes are important in terms of migratory cycles of people, really, especially in the Middle East and subcontinent. They're of course void of any greenery, which is very intentional in terms of the sort of the bareness of the desert. And of course, I'm inspired by Renaissance painters and painters who are traditionally landscape painters. I hope I answered that question. Let's see. Oh, everybody says reminds me of bacon. Okay. Oh, title is, this one is called Napoleon in Haiti. This one is called Survivor's Remorse. This is a newer piece. It's called Call to Prayer. Yeah. Thank you. Right, that's a good question, Tom. The question of figure is really interesting because I think my practice is sort of, it has this. I can go into different spaces. Oops, sorry about that. I can go into different spaces when it comes to painting. So I've usually tried to separate those things in terms of whether I'm painting a figurative subject or I'm doing landscape, and the relationship between the field and the figure is of course very important. Sometimes the figurative elements that I'm putting is through collage, and which is again talking about sort of taking away the subject matter from its original intended context, and sort of freeing them. Yeah, I listen to Coltrane. We're actually playing Ornette Coleman right now. Um, it helps me paint. It's one of those things. Um, let's see. My color palette. It's interesting. I cannot show you my color palette because while I was cleaning, I put away all of my paints and stuff. But for portraits, it's really based on something called the von Luschken scale, which is a scale that was created by a Dutch man. His name is Dr. von Luschken, and it was a scale of racial tones. So you have every sort of tone in there. So I'm appropriating that color scale as the primary basis of my paint, my colors. Okay, let's see. What is the difference between making a painting and art? Oh yeah, that's a very good question, Bartley. I don't think there is. I think it's all can be contextualized at this point in art historic moment. Anything can be converged. It has this duality where any rendering could be put in a particular framing that then becomes an object which we label as art. So there is. I'm not capable of really having that distinguishing. I'm not capable of making that distinction because I think it's such a any. Um, it's difficult to say. Anything can a broom can be an artwork because it's put in that social context and art context where you need to know a little bit about art history and how those things are appropriated. So it's a very good question, but a very difficult one to answer. I hope I'm making art, but even if I'm not, I'm okay with that. Okay. Yeah, smaller paintings are easier. As I said, smaller paintings are really coming from my background as a miniature painter and the accessibility and instantaneousness of reaching out to a small without really having too much preparation in going into the small medium. So I keep these 12 by 12 canvases inside my house, and whenever I have an idea, I sort of just start working on those directly. So almost really sometimes about convenience and sometimes thinking about what scale I'm working on. But the smaller paintings are really easier to reach, less sort of preparation, and of course, you all we all think about like what it is. Why is it that we need to make these big paintings? We must think that if we're making big paintings, they would go to houses that can occupy big paintings, or they're going to be taken away by institutions or galleries or something. So these are questions that then you could uh, you could confuse that with some type of egotistical stuff that artists have going on, make live in small quarters but make huge paintings, and it's sort of that thing that I think that scale is a good scale has its own importance, but I think it could be overridden by the effect that you don't have that space or you don't have the agency to occupy that type of space. Smaller works are just more accessible. Oh yeah, yeah. I listen. Yeah, I have always something going on. Mostly jazz. I like jazz because I just been into it for a long time. So that's mostly my choice. I've been listening to what have I been? I've been listening to Jay Electronica new album, which is very dynamic and really beautiful hip hop. Uh, let's say. Let's see. Yes, I am reading a lot. I'm reading and sort of trying to take in what I'm really doing, trying to understand how artists have responded to things such as pandemics. And so I guess the easiest way for me was to do it wasn't really to look at post-pandemic paintings or artworks, but maybe look at something like a post-war painters, because I think that that's more recent. I can maybe think about larger catastrophes and how people respond to these things. Not exactly pandemics in that sense, but pandemics have their own nature and how they affect, and they don't have any discrimination about where they want to go. And so the pure nature of the pandemic and bacteria is another discussion, which is really, I mean, not nothing recent I can go to that actually talks about making artwork. But the post-war painters are really somebody that I look into in terms of what they've done and how they've responded to these things. This is a very complicated issue. It's almost the first time when everybody has a common enemy, so to speak. Before we would have, other countries, you go into it, but this time it's a pandemic, epidemic, something alien, something that we don't know anything about. But one thing we do know, it can kill us. So that makes it really serious issue, and it can't almost ignore that in terms of how we're living, how we're making work. And there's the future of the art world, in fact, the future of primary narratives that artists put out there. Okay. Studios in South Minneapolis, where I live, 10 feet away from 20 feet away from my house. It works for me. I like the idea that it's convenient. It doesn't sort of, I'm very easily distracted. So if there's something I need to do, I only, have like about 30 seconds where I can go and actually start working on it. Once I'm working on it, then, it's not something that gets put on the shelf, so to speak. Looking for good. Okay, let's see. Questions, more questions. Yes, I can. What about large paintings? What your process with those? Carolyn Payne asking me this. Okay. Carpane, the idea about large paintings is a little bit more programmed, a little bit more thought of. And, there's a process. The smaller paintings are just easy and immediate. Um, so right now I am actually working on a series of large paintings that I was working on a few years ago, and I thought it was a really good time for me to sort of come back to it. It's inspired by Piranesi's imaginary prisons, um, sort of what maybe in one way how we're living our lives in imaginary prisons. And I thought it kind of resonated with the current situation. Those are going to be large scale paintings, just because I think that they need that sort of real estate on the wall to actually make a more important sort of more finite expression. Oh yeah. So the question, Roshan's question is, could you speak? Let me have 1 second, please. Yeah. Okay, I have to answer these, I suppose, in order of how I'm receiving. I'll get back to it. Let's see, Terrence Payne. Bring it back to the same. I'm reading Terrence's question. Allow me a moment, please. Okay. Can't read the whole question for some reason. How do I get to the whole question? And it's a very interesting question so far, but I'm unable to really read the whole thing. So I'll get back to you. Roshan asked me about the atmospheric sort of response um, in the paintings. How do I choose it? I mean, there's just so much you could do with landscape painting, so that doesn't really allow you too much. If you're trying to make a painting that's that's a representational take of anything, then you have to follow some basic principles of nature. So that's how I reach it. And then I mean, I guess with the application of paint, as time goes by, you try to you're always collaborating with with your materials. I don't believe in this ownership transcendental thing for the collage element itself to be put into a different atmosphere. Usually these atmospheres are not produced through a certain voyeuristic idea or presented in like this magazine aesthetics where you look at the pictures and you move on. I think that their existence is more substantial when you remove it from the magazine aesthetics and put it in a painting, and the idea that you place them in a certain position where their sort of character and then could do different things rather than just be viewed or just be looked at. They have a participation in the way that the whole thing comes together. Okay, so I hope that answers. Cancel. Let me see more questions. Okay, good. Let's see. You mentioned Piranesi and futurist architecture earlier. Is there any kind of form architect that makes their way into your work? Yes. So let me just read this question. You mentioned Piranesi and futurist architecture earlier, and there are any forms of architecture that makes their way into your work? Yes, Islamic architecture, mainly in the form of ruins. I did a whole series called uh, Capitals in Wreckage and Broken Minarets, which was really a take on what's happened in Iraq and Iran and the result of these endless wars. Um, I think maybe the construction of line and maybe the suggestion of a certain architecture usually does lead me to sort of this Islamic aesthetic. Um, okay. Piranesi is also very interesting because of what and how he rendered his work, the complete collapse of time, the question of time itself, Chronos and Kairos, and sort of this idea of how time plays a referential role in still images. Um, what's the different spaces? Can you rephrase your question? Yeah, I can show. Well, I could. I'm still learning how to make a painting. My friend David Bardley is saying he's still learning how to make a painting. I can assure him that he does know how to paint. Okay. Um, yeah, Tiffany Lang's studio. Do you have routines when you get into the studio? How do you start painting for the day? It's pretty regimental. I get into my studio and I continue to do what I left off the night before. I'm lucky enough to spend 6 or 8 hours a day in my studio. So, and I'm usually working on one painting for several, well, sometimes for a few months, but sometimes just, putting in 4 hours or 5 hours of studio time, whether I'm thinking about working on a painting, or am I just collecting ideas, cutting collage? And there's so many different ways to spend productive time in the studio. Right now, it's all about sort of reconfiguring how the studio can be used in this particular time. Can you talk about the use of studio? Okay. Okay, let's see. Shoot. Sorry, guys, I'm scrolling up and down to see if there are more questions coming in. Um, oh, you got plenty of time, guys. It's going on till 8:30. So you're stuck with me. Shoot me more questions. Show you around the studio. I would show you around the studio. However, I just painted the studio. I'll give you a little glance at it. How do I do this? Okay, here we go. So it's, here's the studio. It's kind of messy right now, but I'll show you guys around a little bit. Some new work, some old work. I'm working on painting simultaneously. It is also where I try to store most of my paintings. So there's a lot of sort of paintings that are here that need to be sort of put in place a little bit more. I need a little bit more organization. So, hmm. Okay, guys. Okay. Oh, okay. I can take you guys a walk. I mean, it's just here. So as people are joining, let's set up a little war. Mm, okay, so yes, yes. Or do you have any natural light sources? How does this affect your painting? Yeah, what a good question. Yes, natural light sources. No, I do not have any natural light sources. I am painting really in these lights. I really, I used to think a lot about that. Um, I don't really think any more about that because that's all I have. I don't have windows here, and I don't. I used to have a studio with windows, um, but this is what I have, and I think that I am tonally aware enough to where I could work with this light, and I also think that really I don't necessarily need natural light to produce this type of work. Okay, thank you. What's this? Yeah, I can't see the questions for some reason. I don't know why I can't see questions here. Sorry, guys, I'm really not that tech savvy. I should be because I'm from India, Pakistan. Um, oh, here we go. 10 questions. Wow. Okay, I can answer them now. Where are the questions? I know I have more questions. What brings me hope and encouragement as an artist? Geez, we're pretty stoic people to begin with, and um, I mean, I have, I have kids, and when you have kids, you have to attempt at least in some manner to have some optimism, and also have the wisdom to show them that they're really great things. Mm, yeah, I suppose there has to be some. Uh, I feel very lucky, let's put it this way, that I'm able to do this, that I'm able to paint and somehow make it and sustain a livelihood sometimes. So that's encouraging. Being able to paint is a luxury. Being an artist is a luxury. And so when you have that, that sometimes is enough for you to continue making more work. Um, Yeah, there's a new painting with people wearing masks. Yeah, I'm still working on it, but I suppose I can show you. Let's see. Ija asked you if she saw a painting with masks on it. So yeah, this is something I'm working on right now. I'm not completely finished with it. I paint I paint heads at least 3 times a week. So this is one of those studies. Don't know what's going to happen to it. Uh, okay. Some more questions? What is this? I know other people are asking questions. I'm having a difficult time trying to locate them, so I'm scrolling down where they say questions. But I know there are more people who've asked questions that I don't see for some reason. My apologies. So, so I know my friend Matt Backham made a comment, which I can't see. Okay, let's see. I keep looking. Okay, for some reason, I don't see any more questions. If Carolyn, if you want apologies for some reason, either I'm not sure how to use this thing or there is a problem. Probably it's me not being able to use this thing. What is this? Robin Robinson, my friend's asking, is it important? So Robin Robinson, my friend, asks if it is important to paint about Pakistan. I'm assuming that's what she's asking. Not necessarily. I don't like to align myself to a really strict, particular nationalist narrative. Which, well, I mean, I can, but it sort of already puts you in a category, and me. I mean, I guess it to me now is the time to sort of think about the stories you tell as global stories. So whether it's Pakistan, India, subcontinent, USA, it's I mean I live here, so there's a lot that happens here that affects me. So it's an intersection of politics and personal life. So I feel like I'm sort of working on addressing those sub issues, but at the moment there are other issues that I like to talk about, which may or may not concern Pakistan. But yeah, see, Payne sending me a message. Okay, let's see. One. Who am I wearing? Yeah, Haynes her way. It's a good question, T Pain. I don't. I'm really. Terrence asked how much time do I spend promoting my studio practice versus creating art. I barely spend any time um, promoting my work. I may be very bad at it. In fact, I try to make as much work as possible, and I try to engage in conversations about my work, but not in the sense that I'm trying to actually promote myself. Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have people in my life that have been very supportive. So um, please mark on the right comments if it's easier for you to see the questions. Okay. Um, so yeah, I don't promote very much at all. I'm very, very lucky in that sense that I'm at that stage in the career that a few people know my work, and when I'm making new bodies of work, they're interested in actually looking at it. Um, can I talk about business of art, Robin Robinson? Yeah, it's as a person of color, I can really talk to you about the art world and how one navigates in the art world, being a person of color. It's a twofold thing, um, which is really essentially if you are meditating on your own oppression as a person of color, you can almost always have a ear to listen to you because that's what you are made into. You're made into your oppression, and that's what you meditate on, and that's what you talk about. So, in a sense, The art world loves that. Loves appropriating cultural things, cultural uh, oppression, so to speak. And if you look at many contemporary artists from where I come from, their grand narratives are really about being a person of color and really meditating on their oppression, how it affects them in their daily lives, and that's really redundantly sort of played out in the art world, especially when you're talking about an artist of color. Yeah, that's a real problem for me because uh, people of color are not just about their oppression, or their creativity is not just born to that particular topic. So it's beyond slavery and terrorism and those type of areas that we're being typecasted in, and I see that all the time. So, for example, if I have to write a grant, I have to almost be conscious of the fact that if I don't talk about my place in society as a person of color and how it affects me and my family, and specifically this part of sort of this outside oppression, if that doesn't really come out in my work, then I shouldn't say it becomes less valuable in some eyes, but it doesn't have the same sort of how should I say, excitement to some people. Uh, oh, you said Terry, you're saying I'm a good networker, though. Don't you consider that part of it? I don't consider part of that as promotion. I'm honestly a gregarious human being, so I talk to people, and I like to open up about my work to them without really having it framed by the idea that I'm trying to promote my work. And if that's what I'm doing, it's not coming from that place. So that's probably why, because I talk so much, I it's not necessarily network, but perhaps it is networking, but it's mainly just having conversations with people uh, that want to listen to me. um, okay. Mm, okay. Let's see more questions. There's one more. Oh, Carrie, thank you so much for watching this. Carrie Roth Consults. Thank you so much. Um, Let me see if there's questions I can expand on. Comments? Is this comments? My friend says something really interesting. He says, my friend David Bodley saying, "I'm still learning how to paint. Aren't we all, brother?" Yeah, I hope we hope to succeed in it as in other things in life. Let's try to live, and we can continue doing this. Terrence asked, "Do you tend to do more figurative or landscape? Which do you prefer?" I there's there's no stepchild here, so they're both equally important to me. It depends on what I'm trying to narrate. I mean, my paintings are sort of planned out in terms of what the grand narrative is going to be in advance, and I write about it, and then I'm working on a series of paintings. So whether that series includes figurative elements in it or not, it just depends. So it's not really specific. I do make portraits, which are which is something that I've continued to do for years. As I said earlier, try to make about 100 heads a year. Um, that just keeps me, that's just sort of exercising the muscle, so to speak. So it's not really a preference, depending on the message, I suppose, is where it takes me. Okay. Say, tell us about your state of the art. Okay, process. Okay, well, my process is really aligned to what is happening in the world. So my commentary, my choice of narrative, my the posturing of figures, and all that comes from real life and politics and all these things. Not a specific framing within that political dialogue, which then leads you to distinguish between people of that color, people of this culture, and all that, but a larger questions about the world itself, about maybe questions of transcendence. Um, some people have a direct approach about how they want to deal with particular things in their life. Artists of color, a lot of people do want to talk about themselves and about their particular process, their cultural heritage, which is all really valid. I do that, but it's part of what informs me. It doesn't completely cover the entire area of my work. Um, so now the process has to be sort of reconfigured in the light of what's happening in the world with social distancing and a pandemic. It's a historical time. I think two very important markers for me. One was 9/11. Things changed quite a bit after that in terms of what I did, how I did it, and how I navigated myself in this contemporary world, post 9/11 world, and this particular thing, this pandemic. I think it changes our etiquettes of communication, our daily routines. So it is something really um, really important to consider in terms of how we go about dealing with that. I don't think that if you have, you know, artists are generally very sensitive. They're hypersensitive about what's happening around them and the world at large, and so it's very difficult to go about making work that has nothing to do with it. I mean, and it doesn't mean that one cannot talk about other issues. Of course, you have the liberty to do whatever you want to. But for me, this is in that environment. I'm still trying to figure it out.